Gospel according to John. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of Man may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, already there's a stench because he's been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Nothing in all creation can separate us from the love of God. Nothing in all creation can separate us from the love of God. There's much to wrestle with in this long passage. For one of the earliest manuscripts we have is Papyrus 66, which was dated around 200. And it's been seen that it was visibly altered by a scribe to change the name Mary to Martha and make one sister into two in the first 4 verses of this text. Dr. Elizabeth Schrader Pulser was the one who really kind of brought this to light. She goes by the name of Libby, and she actually found this when she was just a doctoral student. And she theorizes that Mary in this story is really Mary Magdalene. And it's she, not Martha, who makes that Christological declaration, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. Now, Magdala wasn't a place, as many people assume, but a nickname. It means the tower. And the only other person to make such a Christological declaration also had a nickname, and it was actually in Matthew, I think, or maybe in Mark too, that Simon Peter the Rock says you are the Messiah. And Libby's premise is that the change was made here to keep Mary the tower and Peter the Rock from being on equal biblical footing, and to keep patriarchy in the church primary. And one of the best supporting pieces of evidence comes from the writing of Tertullian, one of the early church fathers in around 200, who attributes that Christological declaration in John to Mary. And also, the early artwork of this story is very different from the one on the front cover of your bulletin, because it depicts only one sister in the picture, not two. So it seems that not only Lazarus, but the text behind this story maybe also needs some resurrecting. And what if patriarchy in the culture hadn't become the norm in the church? What if the equality between men and women that Jesus exhibited had been maintained throughout the 2,000-year history of the church? What if there had always been women priests and bishops? Would there have been less war? Would we be more in tune with the relational and cosmic dimensions of faith? Now, Libby believes that the one sister and two sister versions of the story actually circulated together in early manuscripts of John, and eventually it was the two sisters version became the one that was copied on and on into the later manuscripts that have survived. But that Papyrus 66 hints that some changes were being made. The scribe was still at work editing the story to turn that one sister into two. So I can't deal with this text without being aware of how the original may have been a bit different. And nevertheless, the story of the raising of Lazarus in this version that has been passed down to us has much for us to ponder this fifth Sunday of Lent. It reveals a lot about Jesus' identity, and it even foreshadows his own death and resurrection. Death stinks. We hear that in the text. We hear Lazarus' sister protesting, rolling away the gravestone. He's been dead 4 days. It's got to stink already. And sometimes situations in our lives really stink, especially things that cause us grief or suffering. And so such was the case too when Lazarus died. Word had been sent to Jesus that Lazarus was ill, but he delayed in coming and didn't get there in time. Grief is very evident in this text as his sisters have that identical lament to Jesus. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I occasionally hear this same lament, maybe in a slightly different form. God, why did you let this happen to me? Or God, where were you when I was suffering? It's comforting to know that Jesus felt their pain. And thus we trust that he also mourns with us in all of our pain and loss. But instead of identifying with Mary and Martha today and the grief that they were experiencing, I invite you to identify with the dead man. Lazarus is the one we are today. We are all bound by our sin and entombed in our heartaches and despair. Our lives, too, carry the stink of death until we hear Jesus call us forth from our tombs into the light of new life. The resurrection of Lazarus isn't into some kind of eternal life in heaven. This wasn't the resurrection of the last day. It was a resurrection back into his life in this world. He would eventually die again, but for now he has more life to live, reunited with friends and family. So what within you has died? What stinks in your life right now? What binds you and keeps you from the free and abundant life that God desires for you to live? Pastor Fred was officiating at a graveside service for an elderly woman he had never met. He greeted the husband of the deceased woman who was standing off to the side, his head bowed and visibly his heart broken. Fred says, we shook hands and then he thanked me for the nice service. And then he asked, Pastor, can I talk to you for a minute? So Fred followed him to a quiet spot about 20 paces away from his beloved's final resting place. He said that he had only shared this with 2 other people, and his wife wasn't one of them. He was a World War II vet who had served in Europe, and one day his unit came under attack. A mortar round exploded close to him. I hit the ground, he said. I was okay, but I heard another guy screaming. I could tell he was badly hurt. He was lying on the ground. His stomach was ripped open. There was a lot of blood. I could even see his guts. He kept hollering and saying that he was in terrible pain. He pleaded with me to kill him. Tears welled up in the elderly man's eyes, and he said, and I did. He said, I shot him. I didn't want to, but he kept begging me. And he would have died anyway. There was a quiet pause, and then he looked at Pastor Fred and said, do you think God will forgive me? For more than 60 years, he carried that terrible burden with him. Pastor Fred looked at him and said, you did what you thought was right because you didn't want him to suffer any longer. God knows that. God knows that you were in a terrible no-win situation. So yes, I believe without a doubt that God will forgive you. The man grabbed Pastor Fred's hands in both of his and thanked him. That vet had spent 60 years in the tomb of his own uncertainty until that pastor came along to unbind him from his grave clothes. Pastor Fred's assuring him of God's forgiveness was the equivalent of Jesus shouting into the tomb, Lazarus, come out! On that day, another one was resurrected back into life in this world. He still needed to grieve the loss of his beloved wife, but on that day he was freed from his tomb of guilt. Jesus is still at it today, shouting into our tombs of guilt, self-doubt, and despair. He calls us to come forth from whatever tomb has kept us from being fully alive and fully attuned to God's love. And then he tells those around us, all of us right here in this community of faith, unbind him, unbind her, free them from their grave clothes. For our Lord Jesus is the resurrection and the life, bringing us day after day from death to life. We unbind others from their grave clothes as we listen to their stories and share in their lives. We free others whenever we unwrap the bonds of injustice that keep the most vulnerable among us stuck in a cycle of poverty. We unwind strips of fear and isolation when we welcome strangers. We unbind the forces of death when we practice neighboring, protesting injustice, and advocating for peace. And we release one another from the stifling hold of the past whenever we listen to each other's stories that perhaps have kept someone entombed for way too long. And today we even unbind this text from the grip of patriarchy and celebrate Mary the Tower, who in John's Gospel was the first to see Jesus risen from the tomb, and then he tells her to go and share the good news with the other disciples. She's the one who anointed him, and very well could have been the one in this text to proclaim her belief that Jesus was and is the Messiah, the Son of God. Now, the raising of Lazarus was the seventh and final sign of the seven signs in John's Gospel. It was the event that prompted the religious leaders to arrest and crucify him. So even a week before Jesus gets to the cross in our Lenten journey, we have a foreshadowing of what comes next. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. When Jesus tells his disciples that he's going back to Judea, they try to get him to change his mind. Common sense tells you not go back to that place that recently almost got you killed. They assure him that if Lazarus has fallen asleep, he'll be okay. But Jesus will delay no longer. It's time to go now. And what Thomas then says next highlights the journey of all who heed the call to follow Christ. Let us go with him so that we might die with him. We've all been baptized into Christ's death and resurrection. We're called to die in order that we might live. Jesus joins us each day in our grief and despair over the state of our broken world. Can we trust in Jesus already at work, bringing us from death to life as surely as he did Lazarus? Are you ready to leave your old way of life behind and be born anew? I think our first lesson also pairs well with the story of Lazarus being called forth from his tomb. For when the people of Israel had been taken into exile in Babylon, they were devoid of hope. The prophet Ezekiel receives this vision of a valley of dry bones. Exile and death happen to God's beloved people. But God doesn't cause terrible things to happen. Instead, enters into our experiences of hopelessness and grief. So instead of asking, where is God? Let's remember that there is God. Right in the mess of our dried up bones, beyond our understanding, God's at work resurrecting us. In Ezekiel's vision, those bones came together, were covered with muscle and flesh, but they did not live until the Spirit came and entered them. So I appeal this day for the Spirit to come forth from the four winds. Fill our dry bones with the breath of life. Fill us with a realistic hope. Fill us with wisdom and courage needed to be your disciples in this day, in this place. We don't understand all your ways, but we can trust that your love is stronger than death. In you and with you are tears of sorrow turn to joy. Call us forth from our tombs of discouragement, fear, hopelessness, and despair. Like Lazarus, we hear you this day call us by name. And then we hear you say, "Come out!"